Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Give a couple more seconds for a couple trailing people to pop in.
Yeah, it's populating quick now.
Yeah. And just heads up for participants, this one's a little bit of a different format than some of the other ones. So you do have the ability to, I guess, interact with us and turn on your cameras and stuff like that. It may have defaulted to it on, just so you're aware. But nice interactive session ahead of us. All right, gents, are ready to get started, you think? Or you want to wait a couple more seconds?
Let's go ahead and do it.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our presentation today about lockpicking, essentially introductions to lockpicking. I want to start out by introducing one of our sponsors today from Datadome, Mike Thompson. He's an enterprise account executive again over at Datadome. So yeah, Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate the intro, John, and hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. Like John said, I'm Mike Thompson. I'm one of the account executives over here for the Datadome team, and it's a privilege to be included in the discussion. And I appreciate the Fulcrum team for providing this opportunity. And I'll keep things very quick for you. I know I'm what's standing between you and the lockpicking exercise, so I'll keep things very brief today. But many of you might not be too familiar with Datadome. I'm actually going to pull up in a short presentation here. And can you guys see my screen at this point?
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. Well, Datadome is the leader in the bot detection and mitigation space. We help customers like TripAdvisor, Etsy, SeatGeek, the New York Times optimize their bot mitigation and fraud prevention strategies by introducing some automation. And surprise, surprise, that automation is available through thousands of machine learning models that we've built to provide a real-time defense at the perimeter. Really akin to some of the conversations we were having earlier today. So this short presentation here is all about the evolution of bots in the last few years, how Datadome can help you overcome them, and what that might mean for you and your business. And I think it's important to start with the understanding that there's been a massive disruption in this space from new tools and techniques that botters have been able to gather over the last few years. There's the introduction of AI modeling, there's better scripting, headless browser services that make it pretty easy for even the most unsophisticated actors to overcome traditional defenses like a WAF, rate limiting, or a standalone caption. Some of those new tools include things like bots as a service, or bots that are built to even overcome CAPTCHAs. They can work in conjunction with humans that are working in CAPTCHA farms, or be purpose-built themselves. And a lot of times they're better than us humans at being able to do some of these more gimmicky CAPTCHAs that you probably are familiar with, where even I'm sure a few of you have been stumped. I know I have. And that in conjunction with things like clean IPs from services like Bright Data allow you instant access to a million of those clean residential IPs from folks like you and I. Those proxies make it really difficult to exclude traffic because it appears more legitimate than a concentrated traffic from a foreign country may have, sort of the tools of the trade a few years back. And then there's new other things like Chrome's headless browser, which makes it even more difficult for us to discern whether something is running a real browser on a real device or not. And rather than layering policy, like proverbial bricks in the online wall, what we do is we create a real-time and proactive defense. We're able to provide extremely high fidelity, bot detection for websites, mobile apps, and APIs through the power of our own machine learning algorithms and AI. So each and every day, we're ingesting over 5 trillion signals into our models from hundreds of the world's leading online brands. And those signals, which we gather from both client-side and server-side modules, allow us to create unique fingerprints for automation that bad actors might use to scale or automate their attacks. And within just 2 milliseconds, we're actually able to discern whether or not that action taking place on your web properties is legitimate or illegitimate. And that helps us to combat things like scraping, which is frankly a driver in a lot of the customers that we bring on. But we can also stop things like credential stuffing, fake account creation, form spamming, card testing, and really any other automated action that a bad actor might be using on your web properties. Previously, you might even have the capabilities to deter some of these attacks, but with Datadome, we're also going to bring some unique visibility into those actions taking place. That visibility allows you to actually classify and quantify the attacks that are hitting your web perimeter so that you can be able to roll up those reports internally as well. So what does this look like in practice? Well, I want to share a brief example with you. The one that I like the best, I think that helps to articulate our value the most is Best Western. That's because some of the data that they shared back with us. Now, Best Western came to the Datadome team to eliminate loyalty point fraud. Apparently, there's an extensive black market for loyalty points through Best Western. People trade them, have monetary value actually tied to them, right? Because you can book a free stay. And well, we all knew that began with account takeover, and the potential use for those accounts could be used in card testing as well. But they really want to sort out their headache with the customers' loyalty points first and foremost. And they were able to share back some really relevant data with us about the before and after of implementing Datadome. And it started with eliminating 97% of the account takeover attempts, that credential stuffing attempts. What that led to is a 99% drop in account takeovers, right? In the 80 days prior, we're looking at 4,300 plus, account takeovers with frustrated customers, maybe law enforcement involved, IT and security getting dragged, fraud teams unhappy. I dropped that down to just 30 in the 80 days trailing. And as a massive cherry on top here, we actually eliminated some automated card testing campaigns. Not what drove the conversation, but with these automated campaigns running in the background, we actually were able to save nearly $400,000 annually, just 1 quarter at a time. And that meant that it paid for the Datadome solution in and of itself, not to mention eliminating those threats of account takeover and loyalty point fraud that they came for. And it's examples like this that really make the Datadome cyber fraud platform so uniquely poised for some of these more modern attacks. Our solutions, both Forrester's strongest current offering and G2's highest customer rated offering. When we put our solution to the test, we're looking at the ability to be able to eliminate any unwanted automation that leads to that fraud. In doing so, we can actually eliminate about 90% of the manual effort that your teams are doing to be able to make those policies and drive those actions, all while having near zero impact on your customers. Actually, it's only about 1 in 10,000 of them that will actually experience any friction from Datadome ever. That friction comes in the form of a simple slider piece puzzle, very simple to be able to solve and overcome for a real human, but rich contextual evidence for us to be able to prove that it is indeed a bot, if that is the case. Like I said, I have much more I could share with you, but I want to keep things really brief for today's conversation. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any other questions or just get the heck out of the way so you guys can get on to the lockpicking.
All right, John, I think that's your cue.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
All righty. So again, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's session on lockpicking called Tumbling Through the World of Lockpicking. Quick introductions for myself. Yes,
Pun definitely intended.
No, of course not, Randall. Never. I'm John Owen. I'm the Director of Security Analytics here at Fulcrum, and with me, I'm so lucky to have Randall Moore.
Oh, did you want me to go again?
If you want to
I'm
introduce
Randle
yourself, for
Moore.
sure.
I'm the CEO over here at Fulcrum, and I am a itinerant lockpicker. So I know there are several people in the crowd here. They're probably way better than I, and I'm looking at you, Jim. So no poking fun.
Oh yes, yeah. Keep the jeers to a minimum, please. Yeah, very much looking forward to this session, everybody. So, really quick agenda of what we'll cover here today. We're going to go over the history, obviously going to set the scene for where lockpicking actually came from and why it's around today. We'll go over the types of locks, basics about their functionality. We're actually going to go into basic lock picking tools, tradecraft as well. So kind of the execution techniques. We'll have an awesome hands-on demonstration done by our own Randle Moore. Then we're going to wrap it up by talking about kind of some defense techniques from a hardware perspective that manufacturers have implemented into locks, and then how that's kind of evolving over time to actually produce more secure and more effective defense techniques for, I guess, different physical penetration activities. So, starting off with some quick disclaimers. Obviously, this is a training exercise. Please consider the ethical considerations of things like lockpicking and the laws and regulations for your locale. There's some stuff here that's, I guess, relevant to the state of Texas on how Texas views lockpicks as potential malicious intent. Things like having a tool card on you, which is a lockpicker association, will lend more credibility to the recreational use of the tradecraft. Again, just buyer beware as far as that goes. Again, don't pick any lock that you don't have express permission or you do not own, or disseminate information to people that you believe have malintent based on that information as well. All right. All of that's over. Where did locks come from? So the first locks actually originated about 4000 BCE. They were essentially like 4-foot long wooden pegs. So large wooden key, some pegs in a wall. You basically shove the board through the hole and align the pegs, lift it up, and then retracted the bolt through the door. So these started very, very early on in Egypt. And for picking manipulation, obviously, very, very simple. Just raise the pegs. You could even sort of rudimentarily create one of the keys and then use that. But obviously, locks have come a long way since then. Here's kind of a timeline of the evolution of locks. From the first metal lock was essentially just a kind of like a triangle entered into a slot that when removed, you would actually be able to retract it over to what's called the Barron's double acting tumbler lock in 1778, followed up by Jeremiah Chubb's detector lock, which had a very interesting concept that it's called the detector lock because if you actually tried to pick it, it would essentially lock shut, providing some sort of notice to the lock holder or owner that somebody, essentially messed with that lock and something to investigate. Followed up by a name that may be familiar to those that have locks in your household or just around. It's Linus Yale Sr., who came out with the first pin tumbler lock in 1844. So the Yale Company is a large manufacturer of locks still today. And obviously, yeah, very, very common for the consumer era as well. They started, you guys can kind of see these in about 7 different varieties, from store door locks. They had a rim and mortise and night latch, a cupboard lock, chest lock, a desk, and a drawer lock. So very much just around the office and the home. All right, moving into the modern era in 20th century, we have Schlage. So they came out with the first cylindrical pin tumbler lock. We're going to go over, it's kind of the form and function of what that looks like here a little bit. These was a very, very rudimentary one. I believe the first one actually, in 1909 was actually just enabled to turn lights on and off, not even a door or access to any sort of location or drawer or something like that. Followed up by multi-lock in 1967. Kind of considered the first quote unquote high security locks. So these were distinguished by the use of telescoping pin within a pin, so a multi-pin stack. in a tumbler design with a horizontal key. So moving away from the previous like vertical keys that most people are used to today, to a sideways or horizontal dimple key where you see actually like small circular or spherical implementations into the key. And then now today, we're actually moving more into what we see, smart locks, biometrics, app and Wi-Fi enabled locks. So this kind of differentiate between smart locks, which are connected to the internet and may be controlled via like remote monitoring or an app, or just standard electrical locks, which probably don't have that network connectivity, but are keypad operated, card reader, some other physical input like biometrics as well. So some masters of the craft across history. Some of you might recognize Harry Houdini, who's known as essentially the king of handcuffs. So he was a master lockpicker, escape artist. He combined his skill, knowledge, and trickery to escape from handcuffs and many, many other locks. He was known for studying locks, essentially, and claimed he had a photographic memory, photographic eyes. He could actually see the differentiations in keys, remember those, and then know how that type of lock or key worked based off of memory. He was followed up by preceded by Alfred Charles Hobbs. He was the first one to pick the Brema's lock and the Chubb detector lock at the Great Exhibition of 1851. This was actually one of the first, if you want to call it, dissemination of tradecraft, because this actually forced some of the lock manufacturers, and the word I was looking for was responsible disclosure, by the way, responsible disclosure in the fact that this forced manufacturers to improve the security of their locks, because this was such a, visible activity of the lack of security of the locks at the time. Actually caused quite a stir, large controversy, and so this is obviously very important to be able to test, verify, and know how secure different locks are, to differentiate between a simple file cabinet at your house or a military installation. Some of you might know the reference to Mark Weber Tobias, who passed away a couple years ago, but he was an investigative attorney, security specialist. He actually consulted with lock manufacturers, government agencies as well, not only in the US, but overseas. And he talked to them about essentially what typical bypass scenarios would be, different locks and security systems, and did a lot of analysis into potentially defective products or some of the risks for the particular platforms and manufacturing types for the locks themselves. He's had many, many textbooks that are widely recognized, but one of the main ones is called Lock, Safes, and Security, which is actually a primary reference from US law enforcement agencies and security professionals across the world. So great read if you care to pick it up. To the more astute of you, you may be familiar with the lockpicking lawyer, who goes nameless here for kind of obvious reasons if you've seen his videos, but he's been a YouTuber around since 2015, and obviously a physical security evangelist, but he's been known for picking or at least bypassing locks and locking mechanisms from many, many different types. In his YouTube videos, we may showcase some here. But he also is one that will work with lock manufacturers to improve their devices and also sell them through his own company called Covert Instruments. All right, some basics of hardware. So there are three, primary types of locks. You're probably familiar with these: the pin tumbler lock, which is a standard key, as you may know it from most doors. A wafer lock, which is like a pin tumbler, and that the key enters and there are kind of stages or gates that have to be lifted in order to open it. The major differentiation here is that a wafer lock, they're flat wafers, not round pins, and then they don't use, there are single pieces as opposed to a pin tumbler lock, which actually has, if you can see here, a pin under a spring. And the point is for both of these, as some people may know, but you need to actually lift each individual pin or wafer up to what they call the shear line, effectively move all the pins out of the way so that the tumbler can actually turn and do the unlocking operation. So wafer locks do use it. They're not called pins, they're called wafers, and they are single pieces. And the difference is that the wafer keys for wafer locks are square cuts, whereas with the pin tumblers, the keys will actually have the little jagged lines and they're more pointed cut. For things like lockers, like most of us maybe had in school, there's combination locks. So these are the ones that you actually enter a set of digits by spinning it, either like this one in like a clock fashion or individual digits. Like some other locks may be. These are often found in, again, lockers, file cabinets, padlocks, trailer doors, suitcases, that kind of thing. I guess comparatively speaking, wafer locks are generally like the less expensive of the range because of the more simplistic manufacturing and form factor. Some basics on, I guess, kind of how the locks work and how to actually manipulate the pins. That's kind of the key for the tradecraft itself. So obviously, first image up here, this is the keyhole where the key goes. You can see if you were to take an x-ray of that, the pin set with the spring on top of it, with the whole goal that you cannot turn the tumbler unless that little blue thing is above the line at which the tumbler meets that bottom pin, allowing it to actually actuate. And so you can see here in the fourth picture that actually occurring. So that's kind of the overall goal of lockpicking, is to manipulate the pins so that they act like a key, put them on the line so you're able to manipulate the mechanism. You can see on this bottom images how different keys would line up with the pins and how they actually actuate individual pins to line them all up in the appropriate height so that the tumbler will actually move over. How this applies to lockpicking. So from the top-down view of a tumbler lock, you can see here there's 5 in this particular lock, 5 different pins. And again, this just so you're orientated correctly. This is if you took a lock and then turn it sideways, and you're looking essentially from the top or the side down at the pins. As you can see here, all of the blue pin tops here are actually intersecting this main line, and they're called, it's called binding at that point. They're not allowing it to turn. What you can do with different type of picks, which we'll go over here in a minute, is actually manipulate each individual pin, either using many types of picks, so that those pins are moved out of place, at least temporarily, so that you can open the lock without using the key. So how do manufacturers try to prevent this from like a general perspective? They use different kinds of pins. So there's a couple different examples here. There's many, many more, and definitely many more in, I guess, R&D as they try to find more techniques or types of defense techniques that are easy. Obviously, being able to modify the pin, because that's the primary point of attack, is going to be kind of top of mind for manufacturers. So there's spool pins, there's mushroom pins, double spool pins as well. Basically different arrangements of cuts that the pin tops can have, so that obviously you can't see into it, but you're feeling. And so if you're able to think that the pin is set, maybe called a false set, then you are less likely to actually unlock it if you think it's set, but it's actually not. And so you can kind of see here the different types of feeling you may get, I guess, from the pin's binding or lifting out of the way or setting them, or the mushroom pin that actually will move out of the way as you kind of turn it here. It's kind of hard to see there, but you can kind of catch it on that corner where you try to push it out of the way, you think it's up, but it actually won't allow you to, because of, I guess, through the act of actually picking that lock. Another different type of attack is snapping and bumping. So again, more different tools people can use. There's something called a snapping gun, which basically is a long pointed object on a spring-like mechanism, which is why they kind of call it a gun. It can even have an almost trigger-like or receiver-like handhold to it, like kind of like a revolver, I guess. And what happens is that pointed tip springs up really, really quickly, where you can turn it, turn the lock so it will shoot all. The goal is to shoot all the pins up above that shooter line, where actually it's the, if I didn't articulate this earlier, the shooter line is where everything meets. Shoot it up there, allowing you to essentially catch them above that shooter line and be able to open the lock. Bumping in itself uses a set or well, one type, but of a set typically of what's called bump keys. What they are is they have ridges set in a particular format that you can actually essentially force and actually tap into the lock, kind of doing the same thing as a snapping gun, but with, I guess, a little more precision. Allowing you to, again, the goal is to pop those pins back up so that you can actuate the key and push them above the shear line. So there's two different ones. There's the push and the pull, essentially either coming towards the front of the pins or pulling out and coming from the rear of the pins. Both ways is that essentially putting that wedge under the pin and sending it vertically, or I guess whatever direction that lock is. All right, some essentials. Some of you might have received some of these in your lockpicking kit as part of the swag bag, but two, I guess, or a couple major sets of tools or primary sets of tools here. There's the tension wrench. What this does is assist in acting like the turning portion of the key. So you're able to actually put pressure, tension on the lock. And then there's different types of picks. So there's hooks, rakes, ball picks, and they come in many different styles, forms, shapes. This is very much an abbreviated list of this is on the essential slide. So you can see different types of hooks there, from the short hook, the gonzo, deforced diamond. Some of these may have different names. But they have different uses. So the hook picks are mainly meant for individual pin stack or single pin picking. And so what that means is that you're actually going pin by pin, moving them out of the way, feeling what the response is, so that you're getting every single pin in the lock. If you hit every single pin in the lock in the right position, you can open. At least that's a strategy. For tension wrenches, they come in primarily two different varieties, either a bottom of the keyway or a top of the keyway. Essentially, it lets you, obviously you can put locks in what we would refer to, I guess, right side up or upside down. It's just which side of the lock does the pins sit at? Are they under it or on top of it? And the opposite side is where the tension wrench will go. On the other side, there are rake picks, so something like these right here. These are commonly like either stretch, double, triple. Sometimes it's by the number of ridges. They can be called a Bogota rake, a snake rake, or a city rake. This is actually used for a different technique that we may go over called raking, where instead of actually doing single pin picking, you're essentially attacking all pins at the same time, similar to what you would do with either bumping or using a pick gun. Some things like this, like these diamond picks, those can also be used for either picking or raking because of the high ridge. I said picking, but either raking or single pin picking, depending on what your technique may be, because you can put them in there and either use a push or a pull to be able to do the same kind of technique as a rake. Some advanced things as you go down your lock picking journey. There's obviously more types of locks than just a simple pin type lock. So some of them actually will have tools specifically built for picking dimple locks. There's also electric picks, which can use either snapping or vibration to actually manipulate the pins. One of my favorites is called a decoder or a leashy tool. And what this is effectively, it's this one right over here. And you can see it's got like a little diagram here on the side with, there's obviously a pin thing right up here, like a little pick. And at the far right, almost like a little, I guess it's connected there to the pin's little handle. And so what you can do is actually feel inside the lock, and you can move it around. This one's built for a 5-pin lock. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over here. And as you manipulate it up through each pin, you can see how far the pick pushes up into each pin. And so that will correspond to essentially this little decoder down here, which will allow you to effectively know the style of key and particularly the kind of key cuts to do in particular depths for each pin. And you're actually decoding a lock pin by pin, feeling it out, reading it on the decoder, and then you can actually produce a key based on what you see there. They're really common for use in motor vehicles to be able to actually cut you a key if they don't know that as well. Some, I guess, less known in the terms of it's not necessarily a pick, but there are bypass tools that can get through locks. So the things like shims, and multiple different varieties. The ones on the left are for combination locks. You basically put them in between the little dials in the combination, and you can sometimes feel a ridge there to let you know that that ridge lines everything up. This one's for a padlock, so like a shackle lock essentially, that you can put on the shackle. And then open the most locks or most shackle locks through that way. And here's a door bypass tool. So obviously, if you lock yourself out of your pantry like I did the other day, you can actually use this to get in between the door and the lock. And instead of attacking the pins, this is actually attacks the latch. And so you can actually open the door through there. Kind of going with the decoder, but a little bit separately as an impressioning tool, which is used for an impressioning attack, which basically allows you to multiple times insert keys into a lock, see the impression of the lock mechanism on the key to note, or at least tell you and inferentially what portions of the lock or which divots of the key actually need to be either shaved down or modified so that that key will meet that lock and basically, it can, like it says, makes an impression on the key for you there. So these are more advanced. These do require like different skill, different tools, obviously, like blank keys, filing for actually filing down the ridges of the key, magnifying glasses, that you may need to actually see some of these. There's even little cameras that have like a pinhole camera for a key, so you can actually see the pins themselves. And so these are definitely on the more advanced side. So now that I've gone over at least summary view of what locks are and what tools and some techniques exist out there for locks, Randle, I'm going to turn this over to you for a hands-on demonstration. So if you have your I guess kit with you, go ahead and break it out. Thanks, sir.
I do indeed. So you all should have received a nice little goodie bag that contains a little padlock here. And the little padlock we have gotten clear so you can actually see the pins as they operate. And for some reason that is not in focus on my screen. Are you guys seeing it okay?
It's a little blurry, Randle. We can make out, like, I think most of it, but
can't see the pins though.
Weird. It was clearer before when I tested, but for some reason it's a little. Well, all right. There we go. That's not bad. Better. Okay, so basically what we're looking at here is the basic pin tumbler lock, and you can see the pins here are not set all at the right height. And the key, this key is actually pretty easy. This lock is pretty easy. You see the maximum height and the maximum low are all pretty together. The lock is actually going to be fairly easy to pick, but when you insert the key, see that the pins all end up lining up, and obviously you can then rotate very easily. You can even see the bottom piece of the pins are all lined up. So this is the part that you're rotating out of the way. So without the key, what we need are the tools. You should have all received a little kit here from Sparrow. This is a basic kit. You've got looks like 4 picks in here, quite a few tension bars, more than you would get in a typical basic kit. But we'll just take one of the tension bars here and one of the basic picks. And the trick here is to get your tension bar in and get a good hold on it. And then because it's a padlock, you're going to need to have a slightly different grip. If you're working with a door, you would have a different environment here. But the basic thing is you want your tension bar to be able to be manipulated up and down with greater or less tension as you're manipulating the pins. And then your pick goes in like so. And we can just I'll show you as you're pressing each pin up and down. You can kind of see them all manipulate as we're, well, the graphics aren't quite as good as I had hoped they would be. But basically, what we do is we just lift each pin as we play with the tension bar. And then we get to the point where the shear line on all of the pins is achieved. And we just spin and the lock opens. And we get the same effect without having key. So this is a basic lock. It's fairly simple to manipulate. Let me show you another padlock that is quite a bit more difficult, and I'll talk about why. So this particular padlock, it not only has a lot more resistance, a lot more force required to turn the cylinder, but also, if you look at the key, he has a bunch more height delta between the middle of the key, which has max low, and the very end of the key, which is max high, which makes picking the lock a lot more difficult. But with this one, same entry point here and same level of force. Actually, you need a lot more force on this one as you're picking. But the one that I find on this particular lock that is very difficult is that last pin. And that last pin, once you get it up to the shear point, kind of have to go back to the other pins, and now it's bound. Last pin is bound, so I know I've got it right, but I missed one of the other pins. So let me get that last pin bound again. And then once I get this one done right, I should be able to just, oop, I lost my tension bar. See if I can do it this way. Maybe you can see it better. No, it's out of focus there. Hard to work on it and be on camera and focus at the same time. And if you've ever watched the Lockpicking Lawyers videos, he's way better at this than I. But hopefully this is a good basic analysis of how it all works. Okay, that should, they're all lined up now. Just get the keyway, unfortunately, is beginning to degrade on me because it's plastic. It's kind of a cheap keyway. So even though I had it picked, I couldn't continue tilting it because the plastic was torn, because I've kind of played with this lock quite a bit, trying to figure exactly how this one goes. The last pin does not want to bind. I don't know if you could hear it there, or you feel it more than you hear it, but when you let go of the tension bar, you can actually hear the pins snap back in, the ones that you had bound. You can hear them snap back in to their normal position. All right, I may have to give up on this one. But in any case, this is the skill that you have to be able to master without being able to see through to see the pins. And you have to do it purely by feel alone in order to do a door lock. Is everybody successful in getting their sample locks picked? Anybody have any questions about how to do it?
You did bring up a great point, Randall, that in practicing as you're picking locks, I mean, it's easy to see with the clear ones, but obviously ones like this master lock that you might not be able to see through is if you get stuck or nothing's moving, let go of a little bit of pressure on your tension bar, and you just listen carefully and you'll hear a number of clicks. That's usually how many pins you had set. So if you can figure out, it's a 6 pin or a 5 pin, you can slowly figure out how close you are to picking in that lock. But it does take a large amount of skill to figure out which pin you're manipulating. And sometimes you actually have to go back to different pins because of the height differentiation. So definitely don't be afraid to, I guess, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, put them up, push them up a little bit. You may feel a little bit of a turn, but then go back to 1 and push it up and keep going through, because it may need to set pins 3, 4, and 5 before 1 or 2 will set, or vice versa.
I do just want to give a shout out to Randle and John for kind of jumping in on this last minute. They pretty much found out yesterday that they were going to be covering this session. So Randall's had less than 24 hours to kind of work on this and figure it out and get it on camera. And I know some of you have had issues with receiving some or all of your shipment. Even our own presenter, John Owen, didn't get his lockpicking kit that some of you got. He's got his own kits there. So really appreciate you guys kind of stepping in and showing how these things work. And for those of you that haven't received your kits yet, we're still trying to track them down. Some of the stuff was coming in from China and got delayed, but hopefully the majority of you have them. And if you get them after the sessions are over, just keep in mind everything is being recorded, and we'll share the links with you so you can always go back and rewatch some of these sessions when you do finally get your kits.
Okay, well, I think everybody gets the concept. Oh, and there is a piece of the plastic that came out.
Nice.
So, yeah, so the cylinder here, the bottom part of it is plastic, and unfortunately, as you apply pressure with the tension bar, it has torn off some of that plastic. So it makes the cylinder not hold the tension bar very reliably anymore, especially because this particular lock is very heavy duty and requires a lot of force to be able to turn, even with the key. Okay, I think that concludes my portion here.
Thank you, Randall. And I know there's a couple questions. Please feel free to ask questions or jump in on audio if you'd like, obviously in chat or audio video. And for recordings, again, you can go check in the lobby. There will be recordings link there, I guess, button after this is done. So feel free to download it, or we'll try to post these afterwards. All right. One other technique that you...
Oh, we have a question here. Can you talk about top of the keyway tension versus the bottom? I think that's an excellent question, and really it's determined about the lock face that you're looking at, and how wide the top is versus the bottom, and if you have a particular tension bar that will fit into that space. In this one here, you probably have a tension bar that will fit perfectly into this space, and therefore help you get out of the way of the picking, because the picking process is all on the top side as you are lifting these pins on the top side right here. So if you get your tension bar out of the way, it's a little bit easier for this particular face, but certain cylinders are cut differently. And ones that have a wider top, if you can insert right at the top, that gives you all of the bottom real estate to insert your pick and do your picking. So that can be really nice. This one's pretty thin. It's also shallow. So trying to insert it here in the top and manipulate it might work, but it's with this particular tension bar, it's not going to hold it as well since it's a padlock. So one-handed is a little bit rough with this one. In a door environment, it would be a little bit different and easier, but I can probably still do it one-handed from the top side with this particular lock. Yeah. So that was on the top side. Any other questions or difficulties with your setup? All right.
Well, Randall, we have someone in
Yes,
the
ma'am.
chat that's mentioning that they can't reach the top pin.
Can't reach the top pin. So on my sample here, what do you mean by the top pin?
Hey,
There's the front and there's the back.
On the practice lock that we got in the kit, the one pin is to actually hold the cylinder in place. So it doesn't get to it, that
yes.
very front pin.
I
Is that
see.
what he's talking
Okay,
about?
so yeah. So this particular sample lock has 6 pins. You'll see 7, what look like 7, but that last one is actually just holding the cylinder in place. It is not a pin. So that one doesn't lift. The last one that you can possibly lift is that one right there. You can see it moving. All right, so everyone is expert lock pickers at this point, I think.
Hey, John, you looked like you were talking on mute just a second ago. I wasn't sure if you were trying to get something across.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think my audio cut there for a second.
You might want to repeat what you were saying.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one thing I wanted to go over, what Randle demonstrated you guys was single pin picking. Another one that I mentioned earlier, some on the other, I guess, tools that you have, notably this one right here, is a rake. And so for a raking technique, use the same thing where you use a tension tool, put it in typically the bottom of the keyway, it's light pressure, kind of like I noted in chat. You're going to put the brake all the way in to the key, above the tension tool, but between the tension tool and the pins, until you get to the back of the lock. And then what you're going to do is, keeping that light pressure, pull out the rake while pushing it upwards. Essentially, you want to put all of those ridges against all the pins all at once, as smooth, fluid as you can, obviously. And then the pick's going to bounce along those pins as you pull it out. And you're just going to keep doing that slowly and slowly. You may even feel the tension rod move a little bit. And that'll kind of tell you how many pins you have done, but maintain a constant tension. You may even, if you look at some lockpicking Laura's videos, you may even have to release some tension, let some pins fall, and some other ones stay, just because of the make and manufacture of the lock. That's a kind of part of this adjustment of the tension itself. So again, if you need to start over, let go of the tensions, listen to how many pins you got, let you know how close you got, and then just start over again. It is good to know that in terms of, I guess, impact on the lock, raking is definitely more destructive to locks than single pin picking. Again, this is one of those don't pick locks that you don't own type things. All right, cool.
locks that you expect to use. And
Yes,
keys
or locks that
you
you expect to
will-
use. Great point.
You will
You
mess
don't
with
want
the
to destroy.
tolerances.
Yes, yeah. So if you get locked out of your house and you need to pick your back door or something like that, just know you may want to go and change out that lock or double check with your key. It's still in the same function as it was before. So over the years, and obviously with the evolution of locks from the early Egyptian period with simple dowels to what we have today, and needing to secure many different varieties of things from your desk at home to confidential folders and safes, all the way up to, top secret or military type installations. There have been many developed defense mechanisms against lock picking. Here are, some of them, certainly not an exhaustive list. But things like kind of noted on earlier, but advanced pin configurations. So either spools, they have serrated and mushrooms. They also have security pins. I guess they call them security pins, but they actually can sit far in the back of the lock that are like alternate pins that are out of the norm setting for I guess, normal pin structure like you would have in a lock here. That get manipulated by the key itself. Multiple rows of pins, sidebars, just more different types of locking mechanisms that interact with the key and keyway. They also put restrictions on, key, what they call key control. So this is the ability for either the key or not a key to actually get into a lock at all. So they could actually restrict the keyway so you don't have as much room to put in picks in your tensioning mechanism, design the keyway more for, I guess, strictly for the key or adapt the key so that that same kind of prevention is there. Weird key designs, some of them are even like a snake with chains on them because the keyway is not straight, which is pretty interesting. Or programmable keys with chips on them that actually have to have a physical and software component to actually open the lock itself. Another attack technique that we didn't cover here because this is lock picking, but there's actually lock drilling. Obviously, the weakest link to something might not necessarily be the most upfront. And so it may just be easier to drill out the lock. So they'll put in hardened steel inserts, they'll have rotating discs. So if you even do drill the key out, it is still not going to disengage. Or actually destroying portions of the lock if it's kind of tamper proofing. So if you actually go to drill something out, it will essentially render the lock inert. And so there's also pick resistance and stuff like that to make it harder for you to pick. Electronic integration is similar to the programmable keys, but this can things like obviously you can't pick a biometric sensor. That's a little bit different, or time-based things that have requirements there. And then anti-manipulation, which is if you even can pick it, can you actually be effective in that or get this interpretive signs to make forward progress in your picking actions? So false gates. So essentially in combination locks where it may have some portions of the lock may appear like they are setting that particular pin, but it's actually not. It's a different combination of the gates that you need to open it. Be a false gate. Magnetic pin columns actually hold pins in particular places, so you're able to not feel them the same way that you would. Or decoy mechanisms like I guess the security pins or something like that actually doesn't have a lot of effect, but may change your interpretation again, because you can't see the inside of most of these locks that you'll be attacking. And then kind of lastly, we talked a little bit about obviously starting with locks, very basic stuff, more high-tech ones today and the evolution of this thing that obviously as we go along and from the first fair exhibition that was given of lock tampering, that essentially our adversaries or the penetration testers, the testers of this hardware influence where we move into the future. And so we often see things like where are those ancient pieces of hardware have modern parallels for attack vectors, and simply like the same pins or lock structure they had back then. All you're doing today is still moving pins for the most part, and so even though the pin tumber locks were created so many years ago, they're still relevant today. So each unpickable lock, as they kind of put it in quotation marks, and Lockpick a Lawyer has gone over many of those types that they aren't really unpickable, or at least they may have different sort of ways around them. And so as we move forward, history often repeats itself, obviously. So old techniques sometimes resurface and in our adversaries today. And obviously physical security is very, very important in today's digital age. So while that's the end of the talk, I did want to go over a couple of video examples. So here's a fun one. Again, we saw Lockpicking Lawyer previously. Let me see if it'll actually let me play this. There you go. So this is lock picking, but just to show you that you may not always need a lock pick set to actually get through and bypass
What I'm
the
going
lock.
to show you now is a bit tough to demonstrate on video because the camera gets in the way. It requires pushing down lightly on the shackle and firmly striking the front of the lock body. This jars the blocking lever out of position and allows the lock to open. Let's give it a try. You can see that worked very well. Let's do it one more time so you can see it was not a fluke. Okay, folks, I think this is a really significant bypass that renders the lock.
So again, might not need a lock. I actually saw this same technique first demonstrated as part of DEF CON one year. And so I think they did it on a lock that was built from military installations. So again, just always, test but verify. One more, this one's going more on, again, not necessarily straight up lock picking, but another tool. This is called a J tool. And so if you're familiar with, most office buildings will have that normal, or I guess, convenience stores are common to have these as well. Just that kind of deadbolt looking thing at the front of the door. This kind of shows you how potentially easy it would be to actually manipulate that. And just keep an eye on this. I'm going to ask a question and be thinking here, how might, I guess, manufacturers or building facilities management prevent this type of attack from happening?
Attack. Now I can show you how to use this on my desk, but it's hard to appreciate the ease of the exploit until you see it done in the field. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. Okay, folks.
Alrighty. Anybody have any ideas on what you could do? Secure the inside with the overlap flap.
Put a metal plate.
Metal plate, yep. Essentially, yeah, prevent them from actually even inserting that J tool in the first place. And sometimes you'll see that kind of metal plate, but that kind of sits between the, I guess, behind the door. And that's what this is preventing, or like this, that's the attack that this is preventing. So yeah, thanks everybody. I want to thank you all for attending this talk today. Hopefully you came away with some sort of useful information you can use in your day-to-day, or at least seeing what is actually secure around you from a physical perspective. Again, further disclaimers, but refer to some of the tool documentation or some of the videos of Lockpicking Lawyer that we've gone over here. And yeah, good luck with your lock trade.
Awesome. Thank you, John and Randall.